Welcome to Land Academy. I'm Jack Butala.
I'm Jill DeWit.
We show you how to buy real estate for half of what it's worth.
And sell it on the internet really fast.
We are Jack and Jill,
and this is the Jack and Jill Show too.
With over 15,000 completed transactions, we're the experts at acquiring property.
Of all kinds, not just land.
For half price and flipping them for way more.
All right, let's get this show started.
Jack Butala with Jill DeWit.
Hi.
Welcome to our show today. Today, Jill and I, in this episode, have a treat for our listeners.
We do.
We're going to talk with Mike Marshall, land use zoning career expert. For the last 12 years of Mike's professional career, he's been in the field of land use and zoning in jurisdictions in both California and Texas. He's managed a variety of projects from large-scale residential subdivisions to several 100,000 square feet of commercial developments. He believes that he can actually help us or help our members with a significant experience in zoning, and it can be boiled down to understanding what we have and what we can get and how we can get it. I can't wait to talk.
I know, I'm excited. This
my
is cool.
biggest challenge with Mike today is going to be to keep this at an hour, less than an hour. He's currently beginning his own career journey into land investing and believes he can bring a unique experience, add some value to the group. Mike, welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be with you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So tell us what you're working on right now.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I've worked in jurisdictions in both Texas and California. So I'm still working in a full-time capacity in a local planning and zoning department. But on the side, I'm also working on some land development projects, a multifamily project, as well as a smaller residential subdivision. So I'm kind of doing project management on that side. I'm kind of transitioning out of that. And as you mentioned, kind of moving more towards my own land investment company. But, also at the same time, what I do is I'll help out different investors, try to understand what they can do with their property. What can I do with this piece of land? And as you mentioned, it's, what do I have to begin with, and what can I get? And then ultimately, what do I need to do to be able to get that?
That's awesome.
It's really, really, really interesting. So I'm going to cut right to the chase. I'm going to probably ask what most of our members are thinking right now. Well, hell, I have 640 acres in Texas. What can I do with it? Can I subdivide it? Can I get it down to 5 acres? So can you help with something like that?
Yeah, do that kind of thing a lot. In general, the unfortunate answer is that it really depends, and it depends on the jurisdiction you're in. It depends what their requirements are, and then ultimately like what the zoning is. And so if you're looking at zoning and you're looking at wanting to subdivide a property, you have to look at things like, what's my minimum lot size requirement? If it's a residentially zoned property, which is I know what we tend to look at more often, what's the density requirement? How many units can I get on an acre of land? What are my requirements as far as roadway frontage? What about infrastructure? So it kind of goes on in terms of the development side of things. But just from a pure zoning perspective, it's going to be a situation of, what is it in terms of the number of units that I can get on the property? And that's going to be dependent on each jurisdiction. And as you move out into more rural areas, it's going to tend to be larger lot sizes, of course, and lower density.
So our whole group is we try to find rural, inexpensive property it's almost 90% of the time it's in a county jurisdiction. It's not in an incorporated area at all. So right. I would assume that's easier, right?
Yeah, most oftentimes that's going to be easier. Again, it's going to be larger lot sizes. And then in some cases too, depending on where you're at, in places in Texas, which tends to be a little bit more subdivision friendly, I think, there's even exemptions for, certain lot sizes. So if you're doing 5-acre lots, for example, the process is a little bit different and more streamlined than in other places. California, for example, is a little bit more strict, and that's not too surprising. It's harder to get things done, through in California. But in Texas, for example, there are some exemptions that allow it to be a lot easier.
Right.
I was thinking that. I feel like you have two extremes there. When you're doing stuff in California, I bet there's so many rules versus every time I do something in Texas, there's still a little of a good old boys, a little more relaxed, and I like that.
Oh, absolutely. It's a much different situation, obviously. And I would deal with property owners that would be able to get things done in easily half the time comparative to California. And so, and unfortunately, a lot of times it comes down down to knowing the process and knowing the players that are involved. And that's been some of the value that I've been able to bring, especially, here in California, just being able to know some of the players, being in the planning profession for so long, you kind of know some of the usual suspects.
Have you worked with counties all over California, or do you pretty much do mostly Southern, which I would think is really strict?
Yeah, it tends to be mostly Southern. I've done some things in, far up Northern California, like Humboldt, Mendocino, Del Norte counties like that. But predominantly it's been down here in Southern California, County of Los Angeles, and then also City of LA, some like infill lots and things like that.
That's cool.
So going to Texas to parcel split a property is probably a treat for you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would do that all day long, and not even think twice about it. It's just a different animal, obviously. Sometimes in Texas it's a little bit interesting because they have, like in the Austin area, you'll have the city, but then you also have what they call these extraterritorial jurisdictions, and you have to get subdivision approvals from two different agencies. And that becomes problematic sometimes, especially if the two agencies aren't very friendly. And that's kind of the case in some instances.
Will you give us a little bit of your background too? I want to catch everybody up on how you got here, because I love it.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. My first experience in real estate was probably about 12 years old or so. My dad and his coworker started buying single family houses in a town about 30 miles away from where we lived. And, he was buying single family, buying multifamily, and basically fixing them and managing them, on their own. And so I ended up kind of being out there with them and, doing re-roofing projects and things like that as best as I could at that age. And so that was my first experience into real estate, and I really quickly learned that really wasn't my cup of tea. Again, there's various different ways of getting into real estate, obviously, and not every one of those is going to be for everybody. And for me, I quickly learned that I was going to probably be interested in real estate, but it was going to be in a different realm. And so, moving through college, I kind of diverged and went in a different direction. I ended up working for a municipality here in Southern California, but it was in the field of recreation. So it was like working with kids and camps and things of that nature. But I always had this interest in real estate. And so I just navigated my way through the organization, got into planning, land use, and zoning. And then from there, it just kind of took off. And I ended up going to Texas for a couple of years, working out there, then ultimately coming back to California. But as you mentioned, working on, small subdivisions, large subdivisions, various commercial projects as well along the way. So everything for, land use entitlements and things of that nature all came part and parcel. So a lot of different experience along the way, but I've been able to kind of focus my preferences in terms of what I'd like to do investment-wise, and that's moving into more land investing myself.
Sounds pretty familiar, Jill.
Oh, to me?
No, for both of us.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah.
Here's, for our listeners, here's why splitting up property is so important from a profitability standpoint. Here's an oversimplified example. In our group, we regularly buy property for $100 an acre. So Jill and I, weekly, sometimes monthly, purchase a 40-acre property for $4,000, $100 an acre. So theoretically, now you're into this asset for $4 grand. Theoretically, if you split it up with not too much work into 1 acre properties, which is, I'm oversimplifying, and you sell each of those properties for $1,000, now you've got a $40,000 asset that you paid $4,000 for. So that's why, now you can multiply that and use your imagination as a listener about why splitting property can be so incredibly profitable, sometimes immediately profitable. So I was hoping actually that do you have a good, simple story, Mike, of working with a municipality and getting exactly what you want when you want it, or is that just fiction?
No.
Perfect.
If you're married, you're probably used to that.
Yeah. I've been able to get exactly what we want, but never quite when we want it, So, it's tough, and it depends. Again, it's each jurisdiction's different, and it really does come down to relationships more often than not. And going in there and creating those relationships is really what's going to help. But yeah, I have examples of that. One of them that was a relatively smaller subdivision. It was a 12-unit residential project project in the, well, it was really an urbanized area, but it was just these leftover remaining parcels. In portions of northern LA County, there's communities that were very like equestrian and rural in nature. And over time, they've just become, overdeveloped, or not overdeveloped, but just been developed with residential development. And so you kind of have this, mix mash of different things going on. And so there are these remnant properties out there. We have a small single family house that's sitting on, like a nearly a full acre property in the middle of these, dense residential subdivisions. And when you find those tend to be kind of like little pieces of gold. And so we found one and we're started to work on it. And ultimately, yeah, it did work out. We were able to get the 12 units done. It's an interesting thing because when you get into these more urbanized environments, there's multiple layers of zoning. And so you may have something that seems really simple on the surface, but it has these things called zoning overlays that lay on top of it. And it may allow for like residential development, which is great, but then it may sit within an equestrian district, for example. And so you have to make certain accommodations for that, or it's within a specific plan area. And so you have to do certain accommodations for that regarding architecture and things of that nature. It becomes political, unfortunately, at times. And so you end up having a variety of boards and that you have to go through and get approvals. And you kind of have to get the approval of the community or the blessing of the community before you really will get the ultimate blessing of the planning commission in this instance. So in this example, it was a situation of really creating the relationships on the front end, talking with neighbors, letting them know what we wanted to do, what we were looking to do, make sure they understood that we weren't trying to drastically change their neighborhood for the worse. But again, it really does come down to the relationships and time that's involved. And so it just, unfortunately, with development, there's a lot of uncertainty. And I've heard you talk about this a lot, Jack, as well, and that it's the uncertainty and that leads to risk, and you're trying to really do everything in terms of market timing as well in the development realm. And that's great when it works out really well, and but not so much if it doesn't. And that's kind of the scenario. So this was a relatively recent project. We got the subdivision through, we got all the houses built, and they're just about ready to finish selling like the last 2 of them right now. Wow.
That's actually a pretty good story. I mean, so you guys crammed 12 houses on an acre, huh?
Well, it was just ultimately it was just over an acre. We ended up getting a smaller adjacent parcel that was probably all told is about 1.5 acres.
Okay.
That's cool.
That's about 3,000, probably 20 after easements, probably 2,500 square foot a lot, right?
Exactly. It's right in that realm. Exactly. And so that's just the interesting thing is that you have these larger parcels that are sitting out there, but the zoning has been changed for so long, but just nobody's gone in and really taken advantage of that. And it takes a lot of convincing sometimes, and so again, it's great when it works out, but it's a lot of work on the front end for sure.
Like Jill's been saying for years, we're in the real estate business, but we're really in the people business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just proving my theory. I mean, you gotta make friends, and then once you make friends, then you want to like do it again and again and again. So
absolutely.
Is this your recipe now for some more in that area?
Yeah, we're always looking for everything or something in that area, just because we're familiar, and like you mentioned, we have those relationships now that we can really utilize to our advantage, and so that's something that we're constantly doing. Trying not to reinvent the wheel in terms of that. The challenge too is that you're always dealing with pending like ordinances or legislation from the state that make it a little bit more challenging to get projects through. And in LA County, there's been a lot of push against rezoning property, and there's just a constant battle between providing affordable housing versus actually allowing for developer and landowners to maximize their rights. And so it's this really big push and pull going on right now that's really kind of resulting in some stagnation in development.
I mean, I know you haven't been a Land Investors member for that long. You are a member, right, Joe?
Yes.
Not yet. Are you?
Not yet. No, I signed up for it. Not yet. I'm finishing these projects and then I'm moving on.
Oh, he will be.
I hope call Jill before you do it, because she'll give you a good break on the price. But, I hope that you're going to send letters out, based on what we talk about all the time. Send a bunch of letters out in North LA County or whatever market you've got identified, and and utilize these relationships to do more deals.
Oh, absolutely. That's definitely part of the plan. I heard one of your episodes a while ago, and there was somebody you were working with that was looking at infill lots to do parking lots, I think it was.
Yeah.
And it's just this one little tiny niche, but it really resonates with me too. And again, just the business model in of itself in terms of the lack of tenants, the lack of structures, the low maintenance, low management is obviously really appealing. And so things like that are really interesting, And so I've been able to identify some of those zones and everything like that we can actually play off of that. But yeah, absolutely. That's definitely part of the plan.
I came from a commercial real estate background too, and it ultimately, just like you, it ultimately led me to developing this whole concept of buying land and just reselling it. Because if you have to start going vertical on it, building stuff and running through entitlements, it's just so complicated. It takes, how long, start to finish, how long did the project you just described take?
From the time that the investment group acquired the property till today, it's probably been 2.5 years.
Yeah. We used to do long-term care healthcare transactions. It would take a year. And it takes 30 to 45 days for us to I call cash in, cash out, the way that we do it now. And every single deal is the same. It's exactly the same. The only variable is the actual property. But we're buying it for cash and we're selling it for cash on the internet.
Right, absolutely. And it's just, the model's really appealing. And for me, I just looking to take the knowledge and experience that I have and just apply it in a different way, And also one of the things that I do like the most about, the work that I've done is really helping people. I've come to find out that a lot of people are out there looking for a different property, and there's just not a lot of expertise and experience out there to really help them out and love them in everything. But realtors oftentimes don't really know much about, land and don't know much about, zoning and land use and things of that nature. And unfortunately, a lot of buyers are really relying on their expertise, and we end up kind of getting caught up in the mix and trying to really help people and provide some expertise where there's just not a lot of it out there.
When we started Land Academy, and it was really Jill's idea originally, because we were chugging along, doing great, buying and selling our own real estate as we are now. When we started it, we did it to give back, so to speak. And man, it just caused a deluge. It's an untapped lust that people want to learn about land. And it's just amazing. You're a great example. You're doing great at some stuff, but there can be and there is a better way.
Exactly.
Well, absolutely. I think the thing that you guys do that speaks to me is just how everything is just data driven, and the basis of everything being the data, and I've told people before, that it to me, it's not so much about the property. I mean, geez, if I could do the same thing with, peanuts as I can do with real estate, I would probably do it. I'm just more into the numbers and into the data of it and, into that whole mechanism. And so I think that's what's really appealing to me. And again, being able to share the knowledge and experience, I would love there to be a platform where people can actually go and not only get the zoning for a property, but understand what that really actually means. And it's so unique and different to each jurisdiction that it becomes very challenging for people to really understand that. You just understand that an R1 zone in one city is not an R1 zone in another city, and it can be completely different.
That's brilliant.
That's great. You're right. Most county websites are lacking information. All you find is the R1 and it says rural residential, or might say up to X units. That's all you get. It's so. Have you been on the receiving end of phone calls? I mean, what's it like when people are looking for more information from you guys?
Yeah, generally what happens is that we'll get a referral. It's usually from an agent. One of the ways that we end up kind of reaching out is I'll go out and just kind of meet with different agents, tell them what it is that I do, and then we get referrals from them. And so from there, somebody will call and say, hey, I'm looking at this piece of property. What is it that I can do with it? Or sometimes they'll have a use that they want to put on the property, and they just want to know, can I actually do that? And so it's that kind of general inquiry that'll happen. And then from there, I'll just end up doing the research, and I'll start with research online and actually going through their code. But, what's interesting too is that it's one thing is what the code actually says. And then there's another thing about how the jurisdiction interprets the code and then applies the code on a daily basis. And so that's where the nuance comes in, and understanding what questions to ask and what buttons to push.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, I love your specialization. Like I said earlier, it's just the economics. We have a couple members in our group that are subdividing, 3,000 acre parcels. And when they get it done, they're not subdividing it. They were just splitting it. There's a pretty big difference, as you know. And when they're done with this, and it's going to take 2 years for them to sell out, but they'll be done. I mean, they'll be done financially in their life on one deal without any debt. So
that's amazing.
Truly, and it's in Texas, by the way. So it's just it's staggering what's possible. So you got to be kind of stoked to. Are you trying to? Do you want to? Within Land Investors Group, do you want to just start to do your own deals?
Yeah, that's kind of where I want to go with it, is do my own deals, just basically start off as if I was like essentially new to the whole thing, so just kind of absorb all the information I can and then get right to it. I have a little bit of a unique position just based on experience, and then also just contacts that I have where I have, money investors that are willing to put money down. I just got to get out there and find the deals, so I have a little bit of a start in that sense,
Came to the right place.
Yeah, that's our area. We always joke about it. We're like, people go, why don't you guys talk about sales? Because I don't need to. It's not a problem. And you got it when you buy it right. It all just goes easy. So that's what we do well.
We have at any given time 300 or 400 deals that we're reviewing, and there's no way we can do them all.
Correct.
We're probably 30 to 60 days away from launching landcrowdfund.com, and that really will. I hope it'll, you mentioned like having a portal, like a zoning portal or one single area where you can go to get like real good real-time information. I'm hoping that this website will kind of solve that. It'll solve the issue of finding money to do the deals that you already have signed up kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
So then if you can add splitting them up, splitting the properties.
True.
That's huge.
Exactly.
Like if somebody like Mike could go in and say, yeah, that's totally splittable, or there's no way you're going to split it in that county.
Right.
Massive information.
Exactly.
That's great. Great stuff. Do you have any questions for us, Mike?
I didn't come prepared with questions for you guys. I was just wanted to be able to say, I'm available. I'm on the Land Investor site. I'm happy to help out anybody that has any questions. And provide information or direction, guidance. Again, a big part of for me is just being able to share the knowledge and help people out as best I can. If there's an opportunity to do a deal together, that'd be great. But if somebody's just looking for direction, I'm more than happy to do that as well.
Awesome. When you are officially in, you'll get in the back end. We have like what we call it our deal board, and that's where these transactions are going on. So we all have people say, hey, I just acquired, X acres over here, who wants in? I need, and then we have people too, like I have a buyer who's looking for X. What do you have? And so we're sharing deals like that in the back end. So you'll have access to all that. They will love to have you.
Wonderful. That's great.
Cool.
Mike, thank you so much for being on the show. Apparently, is there a place that we can find you other than on landinvestors.com?
You know what? The best thing would just be to reach out to me via email. Most of my business has been referral based at this point. So if somebody wants to reach out to me via email, they can get in touch with me at Mike C as in Charlie Marshall MARSHALL at outlook.com.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Join us in another episode where Jack and Jill discuss how to use information, that's me,
And inspiration, that's me.
just about anything you want.
We use it every day to buy property for half of what it's worth and sell it immediately.
You are not alone in your real estate ambition.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike, is it what you expected?
Yeah, no, it was good. I was a little nervous going in, I was like, oh, geez, am I going to stumble? And I have a tendency just to ramble on and on with this stuff. When you have an interest and passion, you'll just keep going on forever. But it was great. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
I'll be calling you. We've got a bunch of property in Texas, and I'll be contacting you.
That'd be great. Yeah, looking forward to it. Happy to help.
It's great, man.
Awesome.
Information and inspiration to buy undervalued property.
We are Jack and Jill, and this was the Cash Flow from Land Show.
We are the experts at acquiring property
Of all kinds, not just land,
for half price just so we can flip it for way more.
and really fast. Thanks for listening. You are not alone in your real estate ambition.